Hey lovely creatives! How do you fancy a crafty mixed media project today? It's been a while since I've done a full-on crafty piece for my YouTube channel, and this one is special. So I'm calling this more crafty. It's a more crafty project for me because I will be using some stamping with other people's artwork. But really it's a bit of both, so both arty and crafty, because I also sneak in one of my own art pieces too a little later, as you'll see. And I have to admit that I don't really do a lot of stamping in my own art these days. I do stamp every now and then on my YouTube channel, as you've seen, and some of my shares have had stamping in it. But if you've been watching for a while, then you will also know that I share mostly my own artwork here and occasionally throw in using other people's artwork. So some stamps here, stencils of course, and other bits and pieces too. But I still do a lot of stamping for magazine work. That's probably where most of my stamping ends up these days. And this is a special piece for one of the magazines I work for, because it was the companion piece for my recent Simply Cards and Papercraft interview. So you might have seen that if you've got issue number 182. And if you haven't and you want to catch it, then I've put the link to it below, as well as the link to all the products that I've used today as well. So you'll find that in the description as always. Now, when I started this piece, I had a vague design concept in my mind. I know the basics of how I want the project to end up. I also know which stamps and stencils I want to use, but I have none of the details. So this is a different creative process to the one that you saw when I did the lemons project for that video hop. Do you remember that one? I was pretty much winging it all the way through on that one. All I started with for that lemons project was a colour combo. I didn't even know the lemons were going to happen in that project, as we all saw when it got to the end. Anyway, if you missed that one, I'll link it up in the cards and again in the description below if you want to watch it. Now these two pieces, so that lemon one and this piece, they did have a similar starting point in that I just wanted to get something down on the page and hope for the best. So for this one, I randomly stuck some found pieces of paper from my junk journals, and also I used a bit of washi tape as well. Then randomly added some acrylic ink colour. And when I say randomly added that acrylic ink colour, I think what I really mean is that it's random in the position, because I purposely chose Orchid and Mango to start this one off. I've only got 4 of these colours, plus a white, and I'm going to stick to those colours all the way through and build up my layers just with those. And I'll be adding another colour in a little bit later, but it's kind of like the white. I'll be adding in a black. So I haven't used these particular inks for quite a long time now, so I'm kind of relearning how they play as I'm working with them. Often when I'm working with new products or products that I haven't used for a while, I will do a swatch and swatch them out beforehand and also see how they colour mix together before I actually start working on anything, particularly if, like this one, it's got a deadline that I'm working towards. It's just not worth the hassle of messing up when you're pushed for time. But I didn't with these, I just went for it and hoped for the best. And these are the Pigment Izink. Is that how you pronounce it? I'm not really sure how you pronounce it, but they're a lovely iridescent colour. In fact, I was a little blasé about this whole project now that I come to think about it. I didn't have that long to get it done, and I was winging it a lot more than I would usually when I'm doing a mixed media commission piece that has a short turnaround on it. So obviously I was either being strangely overconfident or all this letting go practice is starting to reap some benefits. I mean, I'll be honest, it did massively help having an end point in mind to work towards, and also just keeping my choices limited by just sticking to these colours and the products that I was working with. So that all helped and meant that I didn't have to make sure that I had all the stages sorted in my mind before I started. Now, another thing that I wanted for this piece was a lot of colour and to have some lovely contrasts popping with the colour too. So just making these colours really work for me. So adding some tinted paste through the stencil in a cooler colour over that really lovely hot colour layer, for that first layer, was one of these contrasts. And I have a video on using gels and pastes to add texture to projects on my Patreon page. In that video I covered sort of about tinting them as well, because it is one of my favourite things to do. Plus, I've also got a video over there on how to use your warm and cool colours together and get good use out of them. So throughout all of this project, because I was a bit pushed for time, I did use my heat tool a lot to dry off layers, and if I'd had more time I probably would have just left them. But once this texture layer was dry, I added some more colour in the forms of drips and washes, but using those same lovely colours. So the first colours I put down, the orchid and the mango, that orange and that pink. And I really just want to build up some just lovely, yummy visual texture in my layering. So that's kind of what I'm aiming for here. And I didn't want to lose all the colours or that texture of the papers and the washi tape as well when I build up my layers. And when it comes to adding the next layer over the top, I have to kind of think a little bit more carefully about it. And here I am going, oh no, I don't use a lot of purple, like I said in that Lemons project video. And what am I doing here? I'm using purple again. So I obviously use a lot more purple than I originally thought. Now these inks are more towards the translucent, so they're a lovely iridescent translucent ink. I'm not sure how much of the iridescence you can see, but maybe at the end when we do the close-up you'll be able to see that a little bit better. So as I start putting on this layer with this amethyst colour, I soon realise that it's just going to be too translucent and we'll just end up like a glaze, and it will just not be distinctive enough. So rather than doing that, I start adding in some of the opaque white ink that I've got, and also thin it out in places with water to allow the other colours and textures just to peek through. And it becomes a bit of a balancing act between getting that right. I want some areas where that purple is lovely and distinct, and some areas where all the layers underneath are peeking through to add that contrast. So I don't want to make that purple layer just an opaque layer, but I don't want it to disappear as a glaze over the top either. But adding in that white definitely seems to have worked, and it's added its own personality to that amethyst, while still letting me manipulate the other areas so that we can still see those pinks and oranges. Or I should say orchids and mango. So we get to this point, everything's dry, and the design in my head is being realised, so I'm quite happy with the way it's going. It's kind of working towards where I want it to be. But also in my head I have a butterfly stamp that I'm going to use. As I said, I knew exactly what stamps I wanted to use, and you'll see it a little bit later. And this is going to be my main focal point, but the only thing about it, when you see it, you'll see it's just a bit on the small side, and will kind of be lost in this project if I just use it on its own. So this is when I decide to add in one of my own designs, and first I just block out a circle area with some pink and the white. So this bit can be a little bit more opaque, just to block that bit out. Now I did know that the scale would be wrong for the stamp at the start. It wasn't sort of like I got to this point and it was a mystery why it wasn't going to work. I kind of knew it, but I wanted to leave my options open, and this is one of the things that I thought would just grow organically. As I was making it, I would work out what I was going to do when I got to this point. And there's lots of things I could do. So I could add a strip of paper for the butterfly to sit on, or block out the area with maybe some background stamping, or some other kind of texture as well. But I think in my heart of hearts I was hoping that I would get there and then want to draw a flower in that space. I mean, I didn't set out to do my own artwork on it, but it's kind of what's happened, and I'm kind of glad that it went that way. And it just seemed to fit better than any of the other different ideas that, different ways that you could ground that butterfly and make it fit into this space. Well, in my mind anyway. So I had a bit of fun and made an enormous bloom, and I think this is kind of like a chrysanthemum, isn't it? I did this entirely, I didn't do this to an image or any reference photo or anything like that. I just did this to the image in my head at the time. And I'm doing it with a paint pen as well, so the lines may not be as perfect as I want them to be, but they'll do. I have this huge thing for big florals with flourishes and bright colours. It's just the kind of images that I keep coming back to, and I really love how that works together. There's something about flourishes and botanicals that just, I don't know what it is, I just love it. So you might have spotted earlier that I did do some paint flicking and just added a few drops of the amethyst colour, and then I just added some more here and covered up my flower so they wouldn't land so much in my flower, and added in some of the mango as droplets and also flicked the pen as well, so I've got black splatters on here as well, and that will just all add to the texture. And it kind of looked a bit blank without those splatters, so I think the splatters had really helped to bring it together a little bit more. Right, so now the stamping that I keep talking about but I haven't shown you yet. So this is the butterfly stamp that I'm using, and it's a nice bold line as it's kind of got a watercolour outline effect to it. So you do this one, you stamp this in colours as well, it looks absolutely stunning. But I'm going to use black today, so I wasn't that worried. That's why I did the pen work with the flower in black and added those black flicks of paint to this piece as well. I thought it would just be a lovely contrast again from that beautiful coloured background. And I'd already added a bit of colour to some spare paper with the Orchid and the Mango inks, and also added some water in there as well. So it was a light wash of those two inks rather than a thick acrylic layer. And I'm really glad that I used my MISTI to do this, because it took a few goes to darken that line up. This is a mixed media paper that I'm using, and I find that stamping on it takes a few goes, particularly if the ink pad needs refilling, much like this one does at the moment. Now, I wanted to leave a little bit of a borderline around my butterfly, so I didn't cut it out to the stamped image. I just left that little colourful border around it, and I just think that makes it stand out a little bit more from the flower pen work. And I used my paintbrush to add some shape to the wings, and if you've seen me use my butterflies before, then you know this is something I love doing, just shaping the wings and making it a bit more 3D. And then I can place it on my project, and I'm just using a little dollop of gel medium to stick it down. And you can see all the textures really well, and I'm very pleased with how the layering of the colours work. It looks particularly striking in the areas where the stencil texture is, doesn't it? And those pinks and golden oranges, so the orchid and that mango colour, peeking through the amethyst colour. And you might also spot some of the iridescent nature to this paint as well, where it just catches the light. But my favourite bit has got to be the turquoise blue texture contrasts with that layering of colours. It just goes really nicely, doesn't it? And you can't always plan for this kind of contrast, but you can try and make it happen, which is kind of how I did with these layers. And if you go back and have a look at how I layered this up, then you'll see a bit better, now that you've seen the finished piece, of how that all works together. And hopefully you can have a go at it too in your own project next time you're at your work desk. So thanks so much for joining me on this project today. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any likes and subscriptions, that will be wonderful. Thank you so much. And have lots of creative fun until our next arty catch-up. See you all soon.